Okay. Hi, social media. Um, I wanted to take a little bit of time to kind of further explain why I'm getting a little more public uh, about my spoken word. Um, so I always feel a little weird about self promotion, and I know that some of you probably have big gifts, and um, God might be calling you to use them, and you might be scared. So I didn't want to get so open with this gift that I have, honestly. Um, I mean, a little part of me has always wanted to. By the way, this is taped, so I'm hoping it doesn't fall. Just a second. Sorry, that was my hand. Okay. So, yeah, I didn't really want to get all that public about it yet, at least. It doesn't feel like the right time in my life. But I wanted to take a little bit of time to explain why I'm doing it. Um, Welcome to my couch, by the way. And explain how I got the gift and a little bit about my story. So you kind of know who the person is behind all these words flying at you. So I want to speak on a couple of things. One, um, the reason that sometimes the videos are so rough. I know it's not normal in our culture to not try to look your very best. And honestly, I would like to do that. Like today, I have on earrings. See? Um, but for me, when something comes on and it's improv, uh, I have to use it then or it goes away. And I don't share all of that, but um, I think it's kind of fun to see the really rough in the moment stuff that God brings or that I bring. Because honestly, I'm not going to claim it's always God. Um, the gift actually just came to me randomly. The gift of writing. I never was a writer growing up. I didn't do well in school or in writing classes. Um, I just kind of suddenly could write one day. And I'll probably share some of the older stuff that I have. Oh, some point. I should have pulled up this original, but basically I had been going through some kind of really hard time. This would have been like when I was a teenager. I struggled with depression and anxiety a lot. I struggled with school and learning. I struggled with friends. And so at some point, and I struggled with my faith. I was raised in a Christian home and I started doubting at about 14, but I don't think I really told anybody. Somewhere in this process, when I was a teenager, I sat down and wrote a very simple song. I didn't have to work on it or anything. It just came to me and it was, pick me up, Lord, save me, Lord, pick me up, Lord, save me, Lord, pick me up, Lord, save me, Lord, pick me up. I need you to save me, Lord. I need you like I need the air I breathe. I need you like a candle needs a flame. I need you like the flower needs the rain. Oh, I need to see your grace. Pick me up, Lord. Save me, Lord. Pick me up, Lord. Save me, Lord. Anyway, something along those lines. I don't even know if I have it saved anymore, but it was that simple. I need you. Pick me up, Lord. Save me, Lord. I need you like I need the air I breathe. I need you. I need you like I need the air I breathe. I need you like a flower needs the rain. I need you like the candle needs the flame. Oh, I need to see your grace. Pick me up, Lord. Save me, Lord. Pick me up, Lord. Save me, Lord. Pick me up, Lord. Save me, Lord. Pick me up. I need you to save me, Lord. Anyway, once again, if I cared about perfection, I would probably edit that out. But one, I don't know how to. And two, I don't care about perfection. That's one thing at least not an image towards you guys. Anyway, so it was very simple. And from that point on, I could write. So it was definitely a gift that I knew came from God. And most of my writing, I have a few, you have to understand, I have years and years and years of writing in this battered up little laptop. And before that, it was in another laptop, and I probably lost some of it. But I never wanted to share my spoken word because it's gritty. I cuss in some of them. It's a lot like the Psalms. But as I've been growing, the stuff that I talk about is getting to be more and more focused on the Lord and less focused on me. And I think that might be part of the reason he wants me to share it now. So I don't share this for self-promotion, at least I hope not. And I don't consider this gift to be something I can even take credit for, because it's not something, I didn't go to school. I didn't like read a lot of poets and like hone the gift or anything like that. I literally just all of a sudden could write. And so I want to highlight that anything you hear come from me is not me. And I will share, today I'm going to share something a little bit less glorifying to God, just to show where I've come from in another video. But either way, the gift did come from him. And so I wanted to talk about why I look so rough in some videos. I wanted to talk about the concept of like self-promotion versus God promotion. And then lastly, there was a third thing, a little bit about my story. I'm going to give a very short version on the spot of my testimony. So I was raised in a Christian home, broken Christian home. My parents divorced when I was 6. And I remember at about like 9 or 10 coming across some things on the internet that really affected me. I spent a lot of time alone and spent a lot of time online. And I was a heavy kid. I had teeth growing out of right here, those ones that come out of your gums. I had bangs that started about where the seam of this hat is, all the way down like over my eyebrows. Because I don't know why. Sorry, Mom, I'm not sure why you did that. I was cute, but I was awkward, and I was self-conscious, and I was lonely. And I didn't have any friends. And so anyway, to fast forward, I was also overweight, and tried to compensate for, I would get these feelings for guys and then think that they had them too, and I would confess them, because I've always been very open and expressive, and they never had the feelings back. So at some point I just got mad and started, because I was so big, started using an intimidation tactic instead of having to face just how sad I felt and how left out with guys. So anyway, I used to play basketball and beat them because I was taller. I would arm wrestle them and always beat them. And sometimes I'd chase them around on the playground, and everyone thought I was really weird. And that's kind of just the persona I took on, and pretended like I didn't care. I also made friends with a lot of people that no one else wanted to be friends with, that I didn't really want to be friends with either. It was a motley crew. And anyway, I did that to seem like I had friends. So anyway, to fast forward, I also had a lot of female friends that just kind of dropped off for one reason or another, that I'd get really close to, and then like their moms wouldn't want them spending time with me anymore, or they would move away, or so I never really had good luck with female friends. Sometimes they would just kind of stop talking to me and not explain why, or decide they wanted to be friends with more popular people than me. So anyway, that's kind of where I came from. Around my teenage years, I really had like that persona of the goody two-shoes thing, but I was a very bitter, very judgmental person. And I remember trying to lead a Bible study, and I just remember I shouldn't have been leading a Bible study. At that point, this is in, I think, junior high, I had already started to develop some doubts about my faith. I'm going to be really open about that. Because my faith is something I've really fought for. So, anyways, so in my junior high years, I started doubting, and around 14, I was doubting, and then by 18, a friend of mine and I decided that we weren't Christians and we didn't know what it meant, and we wanted to understand repentance, and so we both decided to embark on a journey to figure out what that means. And that was freeing for me because I had been doubting for about 4 years at that point and not really been open about the fact that I wasn't sure about my faith at all. So at that point, I graduated high school and I was not a professing believer anymore. I wrote a letter to a college, a Bible college. I didn't really want to go there that bad, but I wanted to get out of my hometown. I wanted to get away, and I thought it might make me a Christian, basically, because I wanted to believe. I just didn't. And I knew my mom really wanted me to go there too. It was expensive. And I went in the first semester. I did very poorly. And then the second semester, I failed out completely. Ended on academic probation, prayer probation, chapel probation, all these different things. And I was just this hippie who had no idea what I was doing. I would open up my mailbox there and they'd have all these warnings in it. And I just remember not knowing what to do with the trouble I was in there, because they have rules and things you're supposed to attend. And I never got in trouble for bad behavior, but they basically told me I was not allowed to come back after the second semester, which was gracious because I was paying $40,000 a year to not study. Because what I would do was I would go downtown and talk to homeless people, sometimes by myself, in Portland. So I think I was so lost I didn't really care. And I identified with them. So there was one guy that I used to actually bring with me onto the campus. And as you can imagine, the Bible college students didn't really like that. Some did, but some just didn't. They just didn't know what to do with it or with me. I would say I wasn't a Christian, and so people were wondering why I was there, and I wouldn't go to my classes, and I didn't really know where to go next, so I just kind of stayed. But I literally wouldn't show up, and people didn't know what to do. They were kind of worried, and they were kind of jealous, they later told me, because I could just roll in and out as I wanted. But I was a deeply broken, hurting person. I've always struggled with learning, and in those classes, I had more questions naturally than the professors had time for, because I was A, doubting my faith, B, just naturally inquisitive, and questions were how I kept myself engaged. But I was attending college when I had barely passed high school, and I just didn't have the skills for it. So I dropped out. I had a friend who had told me about this road trip that she had gone on. And I later found out, I think, if I remember right, after I got back in touch with her, that she wasn't in her right mind and she may have embellished some of that. But I tried to work in Portland, but that idea of that road trip was always on my mind, that she just left and went on. And I got fired from the job at New Seasons, which is a coveted place to work. And I took off. I called my mother. Hi, Mom. Sorry, Mom. And I told her that I had gotten fired from my job. I had given my 30-month notice at my apartment. And I had a great place to live, too. And that I was taking off on a road trip across the United States and working as I went. Some details I'm realizing I'm going to need to be a little bit careful of in case some of the people who I'm not in touch with anymore but were involved come across this. I don't want to shed light on other people's stuff. This is intended to show where God has brought me. So anyway, if you hear yourself referenced and you happen to stumble upon this, I'm sorry. I didn't use your name. We're all affected by other people's decisions. It's just a fact. So, anyways, so I took off on, I went home, tried to sell a bunch of stuff. My mom eventually forgave me and somehow helped me. I don't know why, honestly. And I took off across a road trip. I thought it would be like Jack Kerouac. I don't know if any of you have ever read that book, but what I forgot is that one, was traveling completely alone. Two, it wasn't the 1950s. And three, I was a woman. And what I will say is I put myself in some precarious positions, and I don't think I told any of my friends or family what I was really open to happening on that trip, and God protected me. I don't even know why it is shocking to me that He protected me so much. But He really protected me. And I remember being invited to parties, and just for some reason, one in particular, I had dreadlocks, and some guy walked up to me in a Winco, and I was so lonely. I was sleeping in my car in Walmart parking lots, finding gigs off of Craigslist. I don't know why I did it, honestly. I didn't have any money, so I had to work as I went, and my car barely ran, and I think I thought I'd find myself out there. And I found a lot of loneliness, and I found a lot of fear, and I realized I'm not laid back at all. And in this whole time, I didn't know who God was. I didn't call myself an agnostic, and I did believe in truth, but I didn't believe that we could find it. So I guess I felt like God created this big cosmic puzzle and then didn't give us the tools to figure it out. And that would be a pretty cruel God, wouldn't it? But so this trip just showed me, A, protection. God protected me. B, I realized how lonely I was, and that I wasn't going to find myself aimlessly wandering. So I had invited this friend of mine who I used to know from this Christian thing. He professed to be a believer, and we had a really unhealthy relationship. And he told me that God had told him He was going to marry me, and we got out of touch, praise God. But the whole time he was hitting on other people, trying to sleep with other people, and I knew he was bad news and invited him on this trip. And he had a friend's wedding that he needed to come back for, and I was his date, and that did not go well. And yet the whole time he clung to the fact that I was his future wife. And so God used that to get us out of touch and get me back to Seattle. And I don't know where I'd be now. I don't know. I might be pregnant, living in a van, strung out. I don't know. I probably would have gotten raped eventually. I probably would have gotten hooked on. I mean, the entire time, all I did was drink. I had never drank before that, but when he joined up with me, we started drinking together. This pillow is bugging me. Sorry. We started drinking together, and I honestly don't think I drank that much, but that was the first time in my early 20s I'd really drank very much. So yeah, fast forward, I'm back in Seattle. This failed road trip. I in 4 months, I made it to Arizona because I had to work, and I didn't have any money. And this is how poorly I planned. I didn't think about the fact. I mean, I invited him out, and he willingly blew a bunch of his money, so that was kind of fun for a while. But so yeah, I found myself back in Seattle, and I was working for Labor Ready at a car auction, and I didn't have any friends, and the guy who professed love for me just fell off when we stopped talking for 30 months. He forgot about me pretty much after that. And It's the grace of God, honestly. And if you're out there, I hope you're doing well. I think about you. I pray for you. I probably should pray for you more, but I hope you've found your way back to Jesus. And I'm not even going to say your name. Um, and I was really depressed. And so I started getting plugged back in church. Um, I guess like I didn't really know what else to do. So I was living in Auburn and commuting all the way to Seattle to go to this church. And one night I left the group. I had a lot of torment and a lot of social anxiety, and I always poured myself out in these social settings, probably to a level that made people uncomfortable because I was doubting my faith a lot still. And I was just telling people that. And I think nobody ever knew what to do, really. Um, and so I would leave and I would get in the car and I would just have these emotional, like I'd make sure they didn't see it, but I'd get in the car and I'd have these emotional breakdowns basically because I just never felt like I fit in anywhere or like I ever would. And I wanted to be a part of the church and I wanted to believe, but I couldn't. And so this one night I called my friend up and I went over to her house and I drank a lot. Um, it probably isn't that much, but um, I didn't really have an alcohol problem yet, so I wasn't accustomed to drinking a lot. So I drank more than she realized because she went to bed and I kept drinking and I got really sick and I started throwing up and I was drunk texting this friend of mine who he's the one who had also given up on his faith at this, not given up, but decided he was going to walk away or not profess Christianity anymore so that he could also figure out what it really means. And in the meantime, when I went off on this road trip, he had done really well and gotten plugged back into church and come to believe again. And so I was texting him. He was one of my closest friends. And just about basically how much of a failure I was. And he texted back that basically just the gospel. And so my little drunk self was reading those words. I don't remember exactly what he said, but something about Jesus atoning and him being beaten for our transgressions and me not having to pay and God's love and Christ's sacrifice. And I guess I didn't think that applied because I had drank a lot. And so those sweet words really have always meant a lot to me. So I fell asleep on her couch and I woke up the next day, probably still drunk. And I was in Seattle and I needed to drive home, West Seattle. I needed to drive home to Auburn. So I get in the car, and I'm sure those of you who have or do have a drinking problem know this feeling of being buzzed. So I was still buzzed, and my brain was just going all over the place, and I was really under attack mentally. I'm not saying I was like hearing stuff out loud or anything, but in my head, my brain was just, I was just really anxious. And I believe that the enemy attacks us in our thoughts if we don't know how to fight back. And he was telling me what a failure I was. I owed money to all sorts of places. Like I was getting calls from the library because of owing them hundreds of dollars. And I just didn't know how to manage my finances. I had a bunch of tickets that I hadn't paid. My credit was screwed. Like just all this practical life stuff that I never knew how to do. And I just took off and basically didn't deal with any of it. And now I was back, and the enemy was telling me that I wasn't ever going to be able to figure it out, and that I was a failure, and that I was in too deep, and that I couldn't fix my life, and I couldn't do this. And I heard in my head, you don't have to do this, basically alone. But I didn't have to do it alone. And God proceeded to talk to me once again, not out loud, but really minister to me in my mind and in my spirit on the drive home. And I don't remember all the wrestling back and forth. I know I had struggled with my identity a lot, and God was kind of helping me realize that it makes sense to put your identity in something that doesn't change, which would be Him. And I had this picture that God gave me. Sometimes God gives me these pictures. They're really vivid and they're really a lot different than if someone were to conjure up, or if I were to conjure up a picture in my head. I'm not really very visual. So um, the times that he gives me visions are, I really remember them. So this one, he was, so there was a person walking with a crown on his head, and he was just strong, and he had his hand back holding mine with not like this, and just fingers completely entwined, and I was a black figure, and I was in the back, and his hand was holding mine, but I was breathing and pulling and just like trying to pull away from him, and he just confirmed for me that he wasn't going to let me go. And so I decided to stop running, and I just remember this kind of joy that I had. I was supposed to babysit for my niece Nora, for my sister, but I was supposed to babysit my niece, and she was going through an age where she had a lot of behavioral stuff, and she wasn't the easiest to babysit. And I just remember this joy coming over me to see her, and just this joyful time. And she even noticed. She must have been like, I would say like, I want to say like 3 or 4. And I was giving her a bath, and she was having the hardest time with the water spilling into her eyes and getting upset about that. And God just gave me this patience and this groundedness in the midst of all that I hadn't had before, to not get frustrated. And between her tears, and then when I explained how to let me pour the water over her face so it didn't get in her eyes, she started laughing, and she looked up at me, and she said through laughter, "Thank you, Nessa." And I knew she could see it, that she could see the difference. And because children, they see things that we don't give them credit for. So I think there should be a testimony round 2, because I'm almost at 30 minutes. And there might be, because I would like to say that it was all uphill from there, but I don't have a Paul kind of testimony where God took me and then transformed me, and I've never looked back. I've struggled a lot. I've struggled with pretty much everything, and some of those things I'll get open about, some of those things I won't. But I just wanted to share that so you know the person behind these words. This isn't for fame. God's brought me through a lot. Later on, I struggled with alcoholism. I've always struggled with relationships, depression, anxiety, health issues that I don't really talk about a lot because there's not really any answers yet. And I'm in a time in my life when the enemy is telling me again that I'm a failure, and I'm not coming to YouTube to confirm that I'm not. What's happening is God is affirming for me that I'm not a failure because of him. So I wanted to wait until I was in this amazing place in life to use spoken words, so there could be this polarizing of like, this is where I was and now this is where I am. And I think that through this process, God, so to explain a little more, I was driving recently, and I used to work at an emergency shelter, and some of you don't even know, if you're my friends, that I don't work there anymore, and I don't want to really hash through any of that, but so I'm unemployed. And I was driving recently, and I was asking the Lord what he wanted for me next, and he put spoken word on my heart, and I was like, no, that doesn't make any sense. I was talking like jobs, or like, do you want me to move to India, or like what do you want for me geographically or vocationally? I'm not bearing my soul to strangers. And I was just praying through it, and it was like spoken word. And I was like, no, you don't get it. I'm not ready. Like, this isn't what I had. This wasn't one of the options I was giving you to give me next. Um, this is very personal. There's stuff I talk about that I don't want people knowing. They could misunderstand. Spoken word. It's like, all right. So that's where that video whiff came from. I decided just to take myself in my imperfect state and the one video or the one spoken word piece that I had memorized and be faithful and obedient to the Lord and just put it out there and see what would happen. So I'm still seeking job opportunities. I was up till 3 a.m. looking for work, but I am supposed to show y'all this and some of me. So, yeah, I would like to end. This isn't really related, but I'd like to end with a little piece of a devotional that I read this morning. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I just want to make sure that this is about the Lord and not about me. So this is from, I don't know if you can read that. It says, New Morning Mercies, a daily gospel devotional. And my grandmother, who now passed away, but she was just such a joyful woman who loved the Lord her whole life. She gave it to me. So this one's about community. God's care comes in many forms. Fellowship is God caring enough to put people in your life to encourage, rebuke, and comfort you. So I'm just going to read the following passage. It instructs me to read it 2 times. So, put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all else, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And that is Colossians 3:12-14. So the words of God are always going to have more power than my words. And I guess I just wanted to spend a little time highlighting that. Lastly, just to reiterate, it's all God.